will be covering another problem in day 2 under the same approach. Also, I will be discussing about the problems, numerical problems under dividend discount models. In day 3, I will be discussing on adjusted present value method and problems on adjusted present value method. In day 4, I will be discussing about economic profit approach for arriving at the value of a firm, and in day 5 I will be discussing about the applicability and limitations of the DCF approach. So I will be discussing problems as a practical component, and I will be discussing two-stage growth model. So where the two-stage growth model assumes growth in two stages of a company, where the details regarding revenues, EBIT, capital expenditure, depreciation, working capital as a percentage of revenues, corporate tax rates, paid-up equity capital, market value of debt during the base year will be given, and also the inputs with respect to high growth rate period, that is, the length of the high growth rate period in terms of years, number of years that there will be a high growth rate in revenues, depreciation, EBIT and capital expenditure, working capital as a percentage of revenues, cost of debt, debt equity ratio, risk-free return, market risk premium, equity delta will be provided, and also the inputs for the stable growth period, that is the expected growth rate in terms of revenue and EBIT, capital expenditures, working capital as a percentage of revenue, cost of debt, debt equity ratio, risk-free rate, market risk premium, equity beta are the data that will be provided, and we are supposed to calculate the value of the firm under this method. So to arrive at the value of the firm, we have to apply CAPM approach to finding out cost of equity during the high growth period, and we will arrive at weighted average cost of capital after calculating the cost of equity and the cost of debt during the high growth rate period, and also during the stable growth rate period. The cost of equity, cost of debt and WACC will be calculated, and we will calculate the forecasted free cash flows during the high growth period and the terminal year, that is after the explicit growth period. Like we will be calculating the free cash flows of revenues, EBIT, capital expenditure, depreciation, change in net working capital, and hence we will arrive at free cash flow to the firm. After arriving at the free cash flow to the firm, we will calculate the present value of these free cash flows and also the present value of the terminal value. And hence we will arrive at the value of the firm by adding the present value of the free cash flows during the explicit forecast period and the present value of the terminal period or after the explicit forecast period. Also, the three-stage growth model will assume that the firm will enjoy a high growth rate for a certain period, that is usually 3 to 7 years. The high growth rate period will be followed by a transition period during which the growth rate will decline linearly or in linear increments, and the transition period will be followed by a stable growth rate period forever. And hence, the value of the firm under three-stage growth model is arrived at by adding the present value of free cash flow during the high growth rate period, present value of free cash flow during the transition period, and the present value of the terminal value or the present value after the explicit period. So here it is similar to the two-stage growth model, and the only difference is here the growth rates for 3 different stages will be given instead of 2 stages. The procedure that is followed to calculate the value of the firm is we have to find out the cash flows of the firm, that is the cost of capital, weighted average cost of capital, and hence we have to arrive at the present values of free cash flow during the high growth period, the present value of free cash flow during the transition period, and the present value during the terminal period, and hence arrive at the value of the firm. So this exercise will be done in 2 classes in week 3. And in the third day, I will be explaining about the adjusted present value, where the adjusted present value approach is applied in the situations of the company in which the capital structure of the firm is likely to substantially change over time, where this model is more appropriate to use. Because the enterprise DCF model uses a constant growth rate or a constant discount rate to value the enterprise cash flows, which makes sense when the capital structure of the firm remains more or less constant over time. So the approach defines enterprise value as the sum of the value of the unlevered equity free cash flows and the value of the interest tax shields. The value of unlevered equity cash flows is the present value of the firm's operating cash flows, and the operating cash flows do not depend on how the firm is financed, and hence they may be referred to as unlevered equity free cash flows. The value of interest tax shields is the present value of the interest tax shield arising from the use of debt financing. By arriving at the enterprise value in this way, the APV approach captures easily the impact of changing capital structure. The procedure to arrive at the value of the firm using APV approach is followed, that is, the procedure that is typically followed is estimating the enterprise value using the WACC approach as is done under enterprise DCF approach, wherein the enterprise value or the firm value was estimated as the sum of the present value of the free cash flows during the planning period and the present value of the estimated terminal value at the end of the planning period. Where we estimate the present value of cash flows during the planning period, and the planning period cash flow comprises of unlevered equity free cash flow and interest tax shield. The unlevered equity cash flow which is same as the free cash flow to the firm, is obtained by deducting taxes from net operating income, and we arrive at net operating profit less adjusted taxes. To this, we will be adding depreciation expense and deducting capital expenditure and increase in net working capital to arrive at unlevered equity free cash flow. And hence, the present value of equity free cash flow is obtained, is calculated. Also, the present value of interest tax shield during the planning period is also calculated, and the present value of cash flows during the planning period is arrived at using the formula, and we will estimate the terminal value of the firm at the end of the planning period by applying WACC, which is the weighted average cost of capital that we find out beyond the planning period. The terminal value of the firm at the end of the planning period assumes that after the planning period the capital structure of the firm remains constant and the firm's cash flows beyond year end would grow at a constant rate of G, which is less than weighted average cost of capital. And hence we add the present values that is being calculated during the planning period and the terminal value, and we will arrive at the enterprise value as per the adjusted present value approach. Learning in detail with an illustration the applicability of the adjusted present value approach. And now, once we discuss and understand the applicability of APV approach, we will discuss one more approach, that is economic profit approach or the economic profit model. The enterprise DCF model is used by clinicians and practitioners because it focuses squarely on cash flows in and out of the business. However, it has a shortfall in the sense that cash flow of a single year hardly provides any insight into the performance of the firm. A declining free cash flow may mean deteriorating performance or investment for future returns. That is, if any company's cash flows, according to its historical statement, is coming down, it means that the performance of the firm is not up to the mark. In this aspect, the economic profit model is more appropriate and is more informative. It produces a valuation which is identical to the enterprise DCF model, and it also gives a clear picture of how and where the firm creates value, which is very important to any buyer of the firm. Economic profit means simply the surplus left after making an appropriate charge for the capital invested in the business, and economic profit of a single period is defined as EP is equal to IC into ROIC minus WACC, where IC is the invested capital, ROIC is the return on invested capital, and WACC is the weighted average cost of capital. Since ROIC is equal to net flat divided by invested capital, we can rewrite the economic profit equation as Economic profit is equal to NPLAT minus IC into WACC. According to the EP model, the value of a firm is equal to the current invested capital plus the present value of the future economic profit stream, and symbolically it is represented in the formula that is shown in the slide. So, if we equate the enterprise DCF model and EP model, how does the valuation as per the EP model compare with valuation as per the enterprise DCF model? Economic intuition tells that the two models should lead to identical valuation. Indeed, it is true, and that also will be explained with an example. Now, coming to the applicability and limitations of the DCF analysis. So, DCF, it requires credible estimates of future cash flows and discount rates. And this approach is easily applicable to assets and firms when current cash flows are positive. Future cash flows can be estimated easily and reliably, and the risk profile is stable. If this idealized setting is being removed, the more difficult it is to apply the DCF approach. In the following situations, it is difficult to apply the DCF method, or it may be necessary to make substantial modification to DCF approach. That is, firms that are under distress, that is, firms that are under financial difficulties, firms that are not earning suitable profits, or firms that are running under losses, it is difficult to apply this approach. Firms that have highly cyclical operations, it's very difficult to use this approach, and firms that have not still been listed in the stock exchanges, and firms which have significant patents and product options, that is, firms that have intangible assets, more of intangible assets, it is difficult to use this approach. Firms that are under restructuring, like mergers, acquisitions, takeovers, these dealings, it is difficult to apply this approach. Firms which are involved in acquisitions and also private firms, since these private firms are mostly unlisted firms, and also many of the firms are new ventures, and hence the cash flows, the historical data to predict the future cash flows is insufficient. It's not possible, or it's difficult to apply DCF approach. DCF approach can be applied only if the current cash flows are positive, if future cash flows can be estimated with credibility, and if the risk profile of the firm is stable. DCF approach suffers from lot of limitations. To understand this, it is helpful to look at and also find out where it is useful and where it is not useful. It is useful to apply DCF approach for valuing fixed income securities, as securities are fixed in the sense cash flows can be predicted or estimated reliably. This approach is helpful in valuing fixed income securities. It is sensible to use this approach to value stocks of mature companies which pays regular dividends or which are paying regular dividends. This approach is also very useful in valuing stocks of companies that have substantial growth opportunities, and this model can be stretched to value the stocks where the value of stock is equal to the present value of dividends the firm may eventually pay, and it is used for valuing safe cash flow such as cash flows of financial assets like leases and hire purchases. It can be readily applied for valuing cash cows, and it can be very well applicable for engineering investments such as replacement projects. It is not so useful in valuing a business with significant growth or intangible assets. To put it differently, it provides only a partial answer when options account for a significant portion of the value of a business. It is never used for valuing call and put options. These options can be valued using option pricing model, which is very different from the DCF model. It does not make any sense for valuing R&D projects, and the value of such project is also represented by their option value. To summarize, there are several models for valuing a company using DCF approach, like enterprise DCF approach, free cash flow to equity approach, adjusted present value approach, and economic profit model. And the enterprise DCF model discounts the free cash flows to firm at the weighted average cost of capital. The free cash flow to equity model discounts the free cash flow to equity at the levered cost of equity. The free cash flow to equity is the cash flow left for equity shareholders after the firm has provided for its capital expenditure and working capital needs and met all its obligations towards lenders and frequent shareholders. The adjusted present value model discounts the unlevered equity cash flow, which is same as the free cash flow to firm at the unlevered cost of equity, and adds to it the discounted value of the interest tax shield on debt. The economic profit model discounts the economic profit stream at the weighted average cost of capital and adds to it the current invested capital. So, from a values point of view, any approach could be used for valuing the firm and make sure that different companies uses different approaches or different methods, or they can use all the methods and compare the results of each method. And thus, it is left to the discretion of the firm that which approach has to be incorporated for valuing the firm, but it also has to make into considerations few things like biases and how the biases has to be mitigated, the uncertainties associated with the valuation, the complexity associated in valuation, like what models to be used, the complexity involved in using the models, so how it is becoming difficult to use or value a firm when there are plenty of models that are available that are complex? How to mitigate the effect of biases in valuation? Also, how this valuation has incorporated the estimation uncertainty, the non-specific uncertainty, macroeconomic uncertainty, and how an analyst should respond to uncertainties. Some sensible responses that an analyst should take into consideration, like using better valuation models, in the sense that an analyst has to build a better valuation models that utilizes fully the information that is available for valuation, and realizing the uncertainty characterizing valuation. An analyst may do simulation analysis or scenario analysis, and he has to come up with a valuation range rather than a single value estimate. The analyst may express his valuation in probabilistic terms to reflect the uncertainty that he faces. That is, for example, an analyst will come up with a value of ₹50 for a stock that is trading at ₹40. He may state that there is a 75% chance that the stock is undervalued, rather than categorically stating that it is undervalued. This consideration has to be made while arriving at the value of the firm, and also you should be able to mitigate the effects of bias on evaluation, and he is recommended to make some considerations or take suggestions, like to avoid pre-commitments. That is, decision makers should not take a prior position on valuation. The list has to do his work without being pressured to conform to a predetermined position. He never link the valuation with reward or the punishment. He has to delink the valuation with reward or the punishment. That is, a process where the reward or punishment depends on the outcome of valuation will induce bias in valuation. So, he should not link valuation from reward or punishment. He also has to mitigate the bias's effect by diminishing institutional pressures. That is, institutions that are interested in more objective equity valuation should shield their equity analysts who issue sell recommendations not only from allied clients but also from their own portfolio managers and sales executives. Also, not but the least, he has to increase self-awareness, which is a potent antidote to bias. The analyst should be aware of his biases and consciously tackle these biases while defining the valuation inputs. So to summarize, since value maximization is the central theme, all managers must understand what determines value and how value should be measured. As valuation is often characterized by bias, that stems from factors like perception about the company being valued, the current market value of the company, and institutional pressures. And it has to be mitigated by avoiding pre-commitments, by delinking valuation from reward or punishment, by diminishing institutional pressures, and by increasing the self-awareness. In general, there is always an uncertainty associated with valuation on account of estimation uncertainty, firm-specific uncertainty and macroeconomic uncertainty, and an analyst should be more sensible in responding to these uncertainties by using better valuation models, by making a scenario analysis or a simulation analysis and coming up with a valuation range instead of giving a single value estimate, and making probabilistic statements instead of a firm statement about a value. So all these topics will be discussed in detail in week 3. Thank you.